My father's voice sliced through the house trash like you should live under a bridge. The chandelier rattled, but he didn't flinch. My mother just crossed her arms, expression smooth, like she'd practiced this goodbye for weeks. I didn't cry. I buttoned my gray blazer, grabbed my keys, and walked into the storm. They thought they'd thrown away a failure. What they really threw away was the woman who secretly owned everything they depended on. 3 weeks later, our family name hit every headline in town right under a photo I didn't take. And that was the night my phone started ringing, relentlessly. People always assumed the Hale family had everything figured out. The house on Ridgeview Hill gleamed like a magazine cover, polished floors, iron gates, perfect hedges, trimmed to military precision. From the outside, it looked like success, but on the inside, you could hear the silence, the kind that buzzes in your ears when people have nothing left to say to each other. Dinner was the same every night. My father sat at the head of the table, scrolling through his phone, talking to no one. My mother asked about his meetings, but never about me, and I learned to disappear. When I was a kid, I thought silence meant peace. Now I know it meant control. My father liked to remind me where I stood. You should be grateful, he'd say, cutting his steak with surgical precision. Not many girls get to learn business from their father. He didn't mean it as praise. He meant, remember who built this life you didn't. He ran Hale Capital, like it was his private kingdom, and I was just another employee with his last name. I came back from New York after years of grinding in finance, ready to help modernize the company. I brought clients, investors, and a plan to fix the sinking numbers. But every time I presented something, my father would smile thinly and say, "That's cute, Clara, but let the men handle the real deals." My mother never disagreed. She just poured more wine. Sometimes I wondered if she noticed the way her husband's company was rotting. From the inside, bad partnerships, silent debts, shady deals no one dared mention. I knew about Derek Lane long before she did. He was the partner who nearly ruined our family once, and when his name appeared again, my instincts screamed. The night before everything fell apart, I overheard them arguing in his office. My father's voice was sharp, my mother's trembling. I caught fragments through the door loans mistake, not her problem. Then my name, and laughter. The next morning I was told to keep my nose out of family business. That night they called a family dinner. The same table, the same silence. Only this time my father had papers ready. "Sign this," he said. "You'll transfer part of your portfolio to help the company recover." I looked at the numbers. It wasn't recovery, it was erasure. They wanted everything I'd built. When I refused, his eyes turned cold. My mother didn't even blink. "You've always been selfish, Clara," she said softly, as if rehearsing it. "Always thought you were smarter than us." Maybe I was, because that was the last sentence she spoke before he told me to leave. People say betrayal hurts most when it comes from strangers. They're wrong. It's worse when it comes from the people who raised you to believe loyalty was love. And as I stood outside that house, rain soaking my hair, I made myself a quiet promise. If they wanted to erase me, I'd show them what real disappearance looked like. 3 days passed before my mother texted me. Just one line, "Don't come back here." No apology, no emotion, just a command, like I was still a child being told to clean my room. I stared at that message until the screen dimmed, and for the first time in years, I laughed. Not out of humor, out of disbelief. Because for the first time I realized they weren't angry. They were afraid. The question was of what I rented a small apartment downtown, all glass and silence. The kind of place where the city's lights feel like other people's lives flickering by. Rachel, my oldest friend, brought over takeout and tried to pull me back into the world. "You should sue them," she said, mouth full of noodles. "For what?" Emotional stupidity, I smiled. But deep down, something sharp twisted inside me. My parents had always treated me like I was disposable, but this time it felt deliberate. A week later, I drove past the Hale house. I told myself I just wanted closure to see it one last time, but that was a lie. I wanted to see them, to know what my absence had changed. It was after midnight. The house looked smaller in the dark. No music, no voices, just a single light in the living room. I parked across the street and waited. At 12:17, a car pulled up. Black tinted windows. A man got out, broad shoulders, expensive jacket. Not my father. He moved with the kind of confidence I recognized immediately, the kind that came from money and danger. My mother opened the door before he even knocked. She smiled at him, an easy practice smile that didn't belong to a guilty woman. It belonged to someone who'd already chosen her side. They talked for a minute before she reached out and touched his arm. It wasn't an accident. It was a promise. I felt something cold bloom in my chest. All those years of being the problem, the disappointment, the difficult one. And yet here she was playing house with the man who'd once betrayed my father. I didn't take photos. I didn't need to. The image burned itself into my memory. The next morning, I opened my laptop. I still had access to Hale Capital's shared business account and oversight maybe, or arrogance. Either way, it was a door left unlocked. I went through the phone bills, travel records, expense reports. One number kept repeating always after midnight. The same name. Derek Lane. I sat back, heart pounding but steady. The puzzle started to form, each piece darker than the last. My parents hadn't thrown me out because of money. They'd thrown me out because I was getting too close to their secret. For once, it wasn't my father's reputation on the line, it was my mother's. And she'd chosen to sacrifice me before he ever found out. I closed my laptop, the city humming below. The truth wasn't just ugly, it was alive. And I was going to let it breathe. I didn't rush. That's the thing about revenge. If you do it angry, you lose precision. So I waited. I let the truth stretch and thicken in the silence until it started to suffocate them on its own. The next week, I parked near my old neighborhood again. My father's car was gone, but the house still glowed like it had something to hide. Curtains always closed, lights flickering too late. My mother's routine had changed her car, leaving the driveway at odd hours, returning near dawn. Every night, Derek Lane's car followed the same pattern. Rachel called it obsession. "You can't keep watching them like this, Clara," she warned. "I'm not watching," I said. "I'm confirming." Every night, I took note of what changed. Who came? Who left? What time the porch light flicked off. The routine told me everything where the lies lived and how often they needed oxygen. When I finally made my move, it wasn't dramatic. I started with a single call to my father's assistant at the firm. I asked for old partnership documents under the pretense of helping him restructure debts. She hesitated but sent them anyway. Within an hour, I had proof, multiple shell accounts tied to Derek's name, all wired from Hale Capital money, quietly bleeding out of the company, while my father blamed me for irresponsible investments. It was almost poetic. The man who built his empire on control was losing it piece by piece thanks to the same person he'd once sworn to destroy. I compiled everything: financial statements, travel logs, security footage from the hotel Derek frequented. The concierge didn't ask questions when I requested the time-stamped receipts under my mother's name. Money buys silence. I just offered more. The deeper I went, the more everything aligned. The business's sudden losses, my mother's late-night calls, the reason I'd been thrown out before anyone could connect the dots. They hadn't cast me out to punish me. They'd erased me to protect her. When the folder was complete, it didn't look like revenge. It looked like closure. I printed every page, slid them into a black envelope, and sealed it with calm hands. On the front, I wrote one word: truth. Then I sent it to my father. I didn't include a note, not even my name. I didn't need to. He'd recognize the organization, the precision, the merciless neatness of every page. He'd know exactly who had done it. That night, thunder rolled in across the hills, the first rain since the day they threw me out. I poured myself a drink and sat by the window, watching the city blur underwater. Rachel called, her voice low. "You think he'll confront her? I think he'll finally see her," I said. "Then what?" Then I let the silence do what it does best, finish the story for me. Outside, lightning cracked, and for the first time in years, the storm didn't scare me. It sounded like justice warming up. He showed up 2 nights later. The rain was coming down in sheets, the kind that turned the streets into mirrors. I was sitting at my desk, the city skyline glowing behind me, when I heard the pounding on my door. Slow at first, then desperate. When I opened it, my father stood there, drenched, trembling, holding the black envelope I'd sent. His tie hung loose, his eyes red and hollow. For the first time in my life, he didn't look like the man who built an empire. He looked small, human. "Clara," he said, voice cracking, "what is this? I didn't invite him in immediately." I just stepped aside and let him walk past. He left wet footprints across my floor, the smell of rain and fear trailing behind him. He slammed the envelope on my table. The papers were warped from water, but the truth still showed through photos, receipts, messages. My mother's face frozen mid-laugh, Derek's hand on her waist. "Tell me this isn't real," he said. "It wasn't a demand, it was a plea." I looked him straight in the eye. "You always told me to be honest. So here it is." He sank into the chair, staring at the papers like they might rearrange themselves into a lie. She wouldn't." His voice broke off. "After everything I did for her, after all, I cut him off. After everything you did to me." He looked up sharply. I saw something flicker, shame maybe, but still tangled with pride. "You shouldn't have gone through my accounts. You shouldn't have thrown me out of your house." The silence that followed felt heavier than the thunder outside. He ran a hand through his hair, gripping it like he could hold himself together. "Why send this to me?" "Why now?" I leaned back, crossing my arms. "Because you needed to see who you were protecting. You thought I was the problem. Turns out the problem was sleeping next to you." He stared at me for a long time before whispering, "You wanted to destroy her." I shook my head. "No, I just stopped covering for her. Same thing you did to me." Lightning flashed across the room, lighting up the reflection of his face in the window, broken, distorted. He picked up the final photo, the one where my mother's hand lingered on Derek's arm outside the hotel. His hand shook so hard the page rattled. Then he whispered, "She was all I had left." "No," I said quietly. "You had me. You just didn't want me." Something in him collapsed. He pressed his palms to his face and let out a sound that wasn't quite a cry, it was too raw for that. The empire of Hale was crumbling, and all I did was hand him the match. When he finally looked up again, his eyes were red and wet. "What do you want from me?" I let the question hang for a moment. Then I said, "Nothing." He frowned, confused. "Nothing. I wanted you to know what it feels like to lose something you thought was yours forever." He stood abruptly, anger flaring through exhaustion. "You think this makes you better than us? You think this cruelty is justice?" I held his gaze. "No, Dad. This truth is justice. The cruelty came from you." He stared at me for what felt like an eternity, breathing hard. Then he picked up the folder again and left without another word. I didn't stop him. I just watched his back disappear down the hallway until the elevator doors closed, cutting off the echo of his footsteps. When the door shut, the apartment was silent except for the sound of rain. I thought I'd feel triumphant. I didn't, because deep down, I knew what came next. 3 weeks passed before he called. His voice was different, quiet, stripped bare. "The house is empty," he said. "She's gone." Derek drained the accounts. "The board's collapsing. I can't fix it." He hesitated, then added, "Come home, Clara. Please, I need your help." I let the silence stretch. Long enough for him to hear what he taught me: power lives in patience. When I finally spoke, my tone was calm. "I don't live there anymore, Dad." He exhaled shakily. "I know, but we're family. We can rebuild." I almost laughed. "You already did that, remember? You rebuilt without me." He didn't answer. The only thing I heard was his breathing, shallow, unsteady. I imagined him sitting alone at that long dining table, surrounded by ghosts of the life he'd built out of pride. After the call ended, I opened my laptop and made a $1 transfer from one of my companies to his account. The memo line read, "For the man who taught me how to lose everything." I didn't block his number. I didn't need to. He never called again. Days turned into weeks. News of Hale Capital's downfall spread fast, investors pulling out lawsuits, piling up. My father's face disappeared from the business pages and reappeared in rumors instead. My mother was seen once leaving the city with a single suitcase. Derek's name vanished entirely like smoke. One evening, I drove back to Ridgeview Hill. The gates were unlocked, hanging crooked. Weeds climbed the brick walls. The lights were off the house hollow. I stood there for a long time, rain dripping down my collar, waiting to feel something: anger, satisfaction, grief. But all I felt was distance. The girl they threw out had finally vanished. What remained was someone they'd never bothered to know, a woman who'd learned how silence can speak louder than forgiveness. I turned back toward the city, the storm easing behind me. Somewhere between the thunder and the quiet, I realized revenge was never the goal. It was freedom. I didn't hear from either of them again. The silence that used to haunt me now felt like peace. Hale Capital dissolved within months, its offices stripped, its logo taken down from the building like a gravestone nameplate. Reporters called, investors begged for statements, but I had nothing to say. The story had already told itself. Rachel stopped by one night with a bottle of wine. We didn't talk about my parents. We talked about everything else, the clients I was signing, the trips I wanted to take, the life that finally felt mine. For once, I wasn't living in reaction to anyone. Sometimes I'd drive past that hill, not to look back, but to remind myself how far I'd come. The house still stood, but its windows were dark. I didn't stop the car. I didn't need to. They threw me out to protect a lie. I built a life out of their absence. Justice hadn't come from revenge. It came from walking away and never looking back. Some nights when the rain hits my window, I think about that last look my father gave me the moment he realized silence can burn louder than words. I used to crave their approval, their apology, anything that would make the years of humiliation make sense. Now I just feel free. People say revenge changes you. Maybe it does. But for me, it wasn't about destroying them. It was about proving to myself that I could survive without the people who swore I couldn't. So if you've ever been pushed out, underestimated, or told you'd never make it, remember this. Sometimes the quietest comeback is living well. If this story hit close to home, hit like and tell me where you're watching from. Your stories remind me why I tell mine. And trust me, the next one cuts even deeper.